Okay, so I'm here with. How do we introduce you? Adam Onslaught or your real name?
Either, really. It's one of them things. But for the purposes of this video, you could be Adam Hayward or Adam Onslaught. I really have no preference.
Okay, we'll go with Onslaught. That's the
Oh
show,
no,
right?
that's good enough.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
you're a DJ and you've got a business, so tell me about that. Where did you start and what you're doing now?
Well, DJing. Wow, yeah, that was. Let's have a think. Now I'm 46. I started DJing when I was 15 years old, maybe slightly younger. It would arguably be younger if you counted cassettes taken to family parties and stuff like that. I was always the one from when I was a kid, kind of just sat by the record deck for the whole party. So we'd have a family do, and it'd be me that'd be changing the records. It'd be me that'd be deciding what was on next, with a bit of input from one of my brothers, who's equally as opinionated as I am about music, if not more, arguably. And it really kind of spurned from then. I've always wanted to be a DJ. You know, there's photographs of me when I was like 5 and 6 years old, badgering the DJ at family weddings to have a go on the microphone, and I'd stand and watch the DJ all night. I never left his side, and I guess for me it was about. I think as a DJ, you have to be a level of, you have to be a little bit of a control freak, especially when it comes to music, because you're setting the tone and the mood, particularly when you're DJing in front of a crowd. So for me, there's always been a passion for music, certainly, and there's always been a passion to tell other people what music I'm into. So I guess that's what made me really start out as a DJ. And then the years went on, and it never left me. It was always, I'd do other jobs, but DJing or anything music related would always kind of always be there in the background, just simmering, as it were, maybe a bit. And then 20 years ago, a friend of mine said, "Have you ever interviewed anyone?" And I went, "No." I said, "Would you like to?" Who is it? I said, "Well, we've got an interview opportunity with Roy Ayers, who's a huge name in jazz and jazz funk, and yeah, a huge musician. He's in Birmingham. Do you want to go and talk to him?" I'm like, "Of course I do. Yes, please." Any opportunities? I cobbled together this really terrible interview, and I interviewed him. Luckily, he was a lovely man, and he was very gracious and helpful. Could obviously tell it was my first time, and I did it then. It kind of didn't put me off. It kind of just piqued my interest a bit, but I had too much going on with DJing, so I did that for a few more years, and then about 10 years ago, I started doing podcasts and then doing some more radio. I've always done radio work along it as well, and then sort of 10 years ago, I sort of started doing podcasts, listening to bands from all over the world through the wonderful thing of the internet, which I was a bit of a late comer to that, and just went, "Oh wow, I've got all these bands. Wow, I've never heard of these. These are great. Give me more, give me more, give me more." So I was absorbing all this information and all these great sounds from different people around the world, and discovering their stories about, there might be a band in Brazil that haven't got a penny to rub together, but they cobbled a drum kit and got, robbed an amp from somewhere and got a band together. And I was like, I wanted to know more about these sort of people and what their motivations and what drove them to do what they did. It's almost like the way I described it, I was asked a few years ago, was almost like a national geographic, but of music. So we would look at stories from throughout the world with different artists, and sort of look at, like I just mentioned to you, about what makes them tick, what makes them create the way they create, the cultural setting of where they are, and so on and so forth. And that's where I come up with the name, the Global Onslaught, because it was kind of like heavy music, but it was heavy music all over the world, and it wasn't all heavy music either at that time. And then someone said, "Do you want a radio gig?" I said, "Yes, please." and the rest is the way it is. For the last 10 years, I've been, well, mainly with you quite a lot of the occasions, to be honest with you, because we've seen each other over the years at various festivals and outings and gigs and whatnot, and it just feeds my obsession with music and musicians and the psychology of music, as it were, the people, the way they are, and just it then led me to this a year ago, just over a year ago. I was asked whether I'd be interested in doing a master's degree, and I was like, "Shut up, no chance, not on your Nelly. I'm not clever enough. I'm certainly not academic enough because I left. I don't know about you, but I left school when I was 16. Went to college for a couple of years, got nothing out of it. Didn't get any GCSEs. I got 2 GCSEs, sorry, English and English literature and language. That was it. The rest was D's, E's, F's, and ungraded. So fast forward all those years, and someone saying to you, "Would you like to be an academic?" I thought, well, I've seen Dead Poet Society. That's quite attractive, as a thought. And I've seen a few films with colleges in, and that looks quite fun. But I'm certainly not capable of that. And they said, well, we think you are because of your experience. And I said, well, I'll do it then. So I threw caution to the wind and started a master's degree, which I graduated from in July this year.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you very much. And had a proper unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't have a proper graduation, but we did an online one in November, and it was nice. It was lovely, and now I have in my office a nice big certificate and something I can treasure forever, as it were. Very difficult and challenging experience, but ultimately very rewarding.
Okay, so what's that in?
Say it again, sorry?
What's the degree in?
It's a master's degree in music industry innovation and enterprise. So it's a fancy schmancy title for getting a business plan together, deciding on what you want to do, why it sits where it sits, why do you want to do it, and then basically the whole course is surrounding is supporting that, doing that sort of end goal of creating your own business. Because when I left my job a couple of years ago and then ended up doing a degree, I vowed to myself 2 things: I never wanted to do that job again, and I never wanted to wear a tie ever again. So I made those promises to myself. And in order for me to do that, I had to motivate myself enough to do this degree, pass it, and then do what I said I was going to do in the first place, which was start Haywood Media Coaching Services.
Okay.
Now, that service is basically born out of an idea from something I saw at a festival probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was, you know what it's like in those press areas, there's a lot going on, lots of conversations, people were recording, you don't go up and say hello to someone because they're recording at the time and all that sort of stuff. So it's very, very busy, very, very noisy. But I'm one of these people who watches everything and observes everything, the good and the bad. So if I'm listening to someone else being interviewed and I hear something mentioned about something funny or something that I didn't know that could be used in an interview, I'll go, oh, I might ask them that.
Yeah.
Or I might, it's nicking. It's a form of theft, but it's not. It's you put it into your own words. You don't just copy whoever's you did. So I'm at the festivals and I'm watching an interview with a certain band, which I will not name, but needless to say, it was awful. And I sat there and I had my back to them, so they couldn't see me at the time. And I was listening to them being interviewed, and they were very sort of like, yeah, well, we're doing this, but we can't say anything at the minute. Very cocky, very cocksure of themselves. And I'm like, there's for me, there's confidence, and there's no such thing as overconfidence. There's arrogance, and they were very, very arrogant the way they responded to questions. They shut the interviewer down quite a lot, and I thought, well, I've got these next. This will be interesting to see. It'll be a challenge for me to get a decent interview, but I'll rise to it. I will interview them. So when I interviewed them, they were equally as problematic. They were rubbing the top of my mic and, talking to someone over there, about getting a pint. And then they were, no eye contact. And then right in the middle of the interview, they dropped the fact that they'd been out the night before and had on a drug binge, drug and alcohol binge. And I could tell something wasn't right because they were all over the place. And I came away from that interview, which I never aired, and thought, well, what can I learn from that? Or what can artists learn from that situation? There's some obvious lessons there you could look at. Don't talk about things that you do that aren't legal, for a start. That's a good one. And don't, talk to people as you would like to be spoken to. Show a level of respect. Eye contact's great. All those sort of normal things. But what happened there? Why did that happen? Why was that allowed to happen? And then, fast forward a couple of years, I came across another interview which was very similar, where I was watching interviewing a band. They were doing a competition and they won the competition. That's the reason why they were there. But they said, well, we thought it was a bit of a fix to start off. And it's like, right, okay. So that one didn't get it. So there's lots of different things. I've been very lucky. I'm very, very fortunate over the years to have had some really great interviews and really enjoyed them, and they've enjoyed themselves as well. The conversations flowed beautifully. But there are the odd occasion more so with bands that have less experience with interviews and interviewing, whereas I saw a gap, and the gap for me, what I saw was the PR. So you got a press agent who helps them with the bio, books them interviews, and then goes, right then. I'm not saying that you do this, by the way, Nick. I'm sure you don't. I'm sure you give them some lovely guidance. But a lot of people will just go, right then, here's your interviews. You're with such and such. You're with them. You're with them. You're with them. Off you go. I've booked you interviews. I've ticked a box so I can get paid this month. That's a bit of a cynic's view of it, but I'm talking in the broadest terms here. I'm not saying that everyone in PR does the same thing. Tick a box. Right. They've got, 5 interviews with 5 radio stations. Send them off. There's no duty of care beyond that point. And there's no commitment to that either, because it's not in the contract. It's not something that historically has been done. But the gap is there. There is definitely a gap. And the gap is, how do we do this interview in the best way we can? How do we convey our story and appeal to people on an emotional level? How do we appeal to people on relatability? Because all these things are important. Any story that you read, if it doesn't engage you within the first couple of paragraphs, we spoke earlier on about bios and the way that they're put together. Someone doesn't grab you within the first couple of seconds, it's in the trash. It's not read, or it's not. You don't absorb it. You're not piquing people's interest. Good writers will tell you there is a process to these things, and we can apply that level of writing to bios, and we can apply that level of interest to bands. So bands need to be invested in their story, because if they're not invested in their story, they don't know what to talk about, and when they don't know what to talk about, that's when you get bands that aren't confident doing interviews. And when you're not confident, we can make mistakes, and we can do things that we probably wouldn't have done if we were confident in these interviews. Now, bands that have been around, like you and I have both interviewed some very established artists who have done thousands of interviews and could turn an interview around in like that. They're brilliant. No problem at all. You ask one question and they're off. And it's wonderful. Your job's an easy job. And then you'll have the less experienced people where it's like you have to drive the interview. So what I do is I prepare artists. We sit together, we look at their stories, how they are currently, we look how they could be. I introduce some ideas to them about their stories. And then what that then does, we work on the confidence of the artist. So often you'll find and it's 9 times out of 10 I've asked this question to any of my clients. When I say, who does the interviewing? It's always the guitarist and the vocalist most of all. And then Bob the bass player. You talk to Bob the bass player. I don't do interviews. Why don't you do them? I'm not very good at them. I'm not really confident. And you'll find that the confidence isn't there because they don't feel invested in the story. The narrative to that point is all about what's in the vocals and how the music's put together. But the music's written by the guitarist, the vocals are written by the singer. So what the drummer and the bass player are like two doodads at a wedding at this point, and they're like, well, it's their story. We're just there for the ride, really. So that's when you get problems in interviews because, as you know, when you're coming up the ranks in your interviewing, you always, inevitably when you first start, you get the drummer or the bass player in a more established art, and you're smiling because it's true, but you do. So what I'm proposing to my clients is let the story be told by the bass player and the drummer. Let them show you their connectivity to the story, and if they can find that connection, which they all can, there is a connection somewhere with everything, because a guitarist will not give a drummer manuscript and go, right, I want you to play it like that. A drummer will be there listening to what's going on, get a feel, get the emotion and all that sort of thing. So why can't they tie that emotion to the story? And then when they've got the story and they're confident in that story, they naturally deliver a more enthusiastic and better interview because they're invested.
Yeah.
They've got that investment in the story. So, and when you're confident, you're much better at what you're doing, and you can deliver it. So when, for example, you've got a band at Download Festival that you're working with, and you've got 4 or 5 members of the band, and you've got 20 interviews, I'm saying, if you've got 5 of them, I can get them done in an hour. And you're like, what, 20 interviews in an hour? Yep, because every single person in the band can go off and do a really good interview. And, of course, it's not just about the story. It's about observing your own behaviours. It's about little tricks that we go through with my clients. Just little simple psychology things. About communication and how to be with people. So this is where we're at the moment. And of course, at the minute, it's difficult because COVID's here and no one's doing live gigs and albums have been postponed, and we're at the bottom of the pile in terms of priorities. Are they going to buy a 4-pack of beans, or are they going to pay me for an hour? I think they're going to buy the baked beans. That sort of situation. But we can still be helpful and we can still be useful to emerging artists.
Absolutely. So do you do work with the buyer as well? Do you help them with
that? To a degree, yeah. I always believe that a coach's role is not to do something direct. So I'm not going to sit there. If you employed me to be your coach, I'm not going to write your story for you. But what I am going to do is give you some things to think about during the writing process. So you go, yep, that's fine, but how about this? How about that? Have you thought about this? So basically, I used the paper boat scenario the other week to someone. And my job, you get a boat, you put it on a still lake, and you let it go, and it floats. And sometimes, occasionally, on its journey, it will veer to the left or veer to the right. My job there is just to tap that paper boat back into a straight line. So I do help with bios to answer your question directly, but the way I do it isn't to sit there and completely construct a new bio for somebody, because it has to come from them. It's their story and not mine.
Yeah.
So they have to believe in it and invest in it themselves. So the only way they can do that is to write it. All I can do is steer it. So I steer it, but I don't directly write it.
Well, it sounds like you have a whole head full of wisdom and top tips to give. That's your business, essentially.
It is essentially,
yeah. Which one can you give away? It doesn't necessarily have to be your best, but maybe something that's not often come across, or just a little something, a little nugget.
Okay. Well, there is one that sticks out or comes straight immediately to mind, and it's a real simple one, and it's about going back to the psychology of being interviewed and interviewing. But here's the thing, Nick. Now, you might agree with this or you might not agree with it, but all interviewers, all radio DJs, all press, there's an element of ego. We all have an ego, a persona that we like to portray. I'm more enthusiastic here than I am sitting down watching TV downstairs. It's just part of the way we are. But we all have an ego, including myself. That's why I'm wearing this ridiculous shirt. Anyway, so
ridiculous jumper.
That's not ridiculous. That's Star Wars. There's nothing ridiculous about that. It's beautiful. But when we're with these people, we seek to do that little thing, and I call it a 5-minute friendship. And it's that little moment before you press record where you get to know each other really, really quickly. So if I come to you and I'm interviewing you in your band, and I go, "Hi, I'm Adam Onslaught from MMH, the home of rock radio, yada, yada, yada," start the interview. 9 times out of 10, you will not remember my name or what radio station I'm from. And it is really, really simple. If you can, and I think you should, and this is the reason for the tip, is to try and at least remember their first name. This is a lovely little nugget of information throughout the interview. So I'll go, "Thanks for having us, Nick. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, so we did. So when we first got together to talk about this album, Nick, it was just absolutely incredible. And then, you know what, Nick, that's a really good question. And then drop your name in a couple of times. And politicians do this quite a lot. You'll see on those daily updates from the PM where he will mention the person's name who asked the question at least 3 times. It's a very obvious way of doing it, the way that they do it. And maybe because I recognise it, but it's an acknowledgement thing, and it's a really important part of human interaction and human psychology, because people want to be liked. I know you get certain people go, "I don't care what people think about me, yada, yada, yada." But the truth of the matter is, everybody wants to be liked. And if you're liked and remembered by somebody that you admire, I should say, sorry, get my words out, then that tickles the presenter's ego a little bit under the chin, gives them a little bit of, makes them think, they've took the time to remember me, they took the time to remember my name. And believe it or not, you'll walk away from that interview and you'll remember the interview, even though you've probably done 30 that day. You'll remember that one, and you'll remember them. And when you're sat at your desk in your office a week later, deciding on what your playlist's going to be, and an email comes through with that band's record on it, I interviewed them like, "Oh, they were great guys. They were great guys because they engaged with you." And just mentioning the name of the other person means that you're paying attention to them, that their interview is important. And when interviewers feel like they're being taken seriously and their questions being considered, and not just like, yeah, we went on tour and yada yada yada. It tickles their ego. Seriously does. It's basic human psychology. Politicians use it, and it's a little bit more crass and obvious. But when you're doing an interview, if you use that person's name in a not such an obvious way, don't go, well, Nick, when we started out, Nick, and we did this, Nick, and we did that, Nick. But if you do it a couple of 3 times, maybe 2-3 times throughout the whole of the 15-minute interview, then it does some magical endorphin things, which then turn into actual actions and responses. It's really clever, but it's very, very basic.
Yeah, I guess that works both ways as well.
It does indeed. Absolutely.
Interviewers as well, which is, I'm dreadful with names. I'm so bad. It takes
Me too.
Even people I've known for 10 years, I can struggle to remember their name.
Yeah, I'm awful.
Total fan face, but names. Oof.
You're the same as me, and the interesting thing, another thing as well, which people get a little bit of a hang up about when you're in a band and you're doing when you're doing a press junket interviews, junket style set of interviews where you're being interviewed by 20 different people on the same day, and it's like, oh, who's that? Oh my God, I can't remember all these people. Pen and paper. Dead simple. No one will think you're unprofessional for having one. I would much prefer someone go, oh, sorry, what was your name again? They go, Adam. I go, write it down. I don't care. That, to me, is a sign of respect, because you've respectfully tried to remember something. And that, again, tickles my ego a little bit more. But it also helps the artist, because often or not, when you're being interviewed, the stumbling blocks are, oh, shit, I forgot what the album's called. We've worked on an album for a year and I've forgotten what it's called. Have it written down.
Info sheet.
Really, really simple. Album. The album, what's it called? What have you got coming out at the minute?
Release date.
Try to remember. Yeah, exactly. All your social media links. So if you're selling something, and let's face it, an interview is an opportunity to sell something, to sell your product. If your product's you, then that's the product, the asset, to give it its crassest term. But we need to know where to get it from. We need to know, if you've got an album that's out on blue vinyl, I'm very interested in that and I want to buy it. But if I don't know where to get it, it's never going to happen. The transaction is never going to be completed. To help people make the transaction. Make it easy for them, but write it all down, so you don't have to have the stress of forgetting. The stress of forgetting something can often cloud a really good interview. But if you've got it all there and you're prepared, you've got all your armor being your pen and your paper, then you'll make a better interview because you're relaxed.
That's it.
The stress is gone.
You've got a backup. Exactly.
And no one will ever criticize you for it. I certainly wouldn't. No. That's for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Because it's a lot to remember. To be able to remember all that, it's like learning a song, essentially.
Exactly. And of course, when you first, when we do Download Festival, for example, when you get the young artists on that have been selected to play, they are rabbits in a headlight. From the minute they get to site to the minute they leave. And I always tell them, try and enjoy the day. Try and take a moment just to sit and be mindful for a second and take everything in. Because when they're like that, again, the PR person will be lovely and they'll be with them all day and they'll fetch and carry for them and they'll go and sort the beers out with the rider and go and get them lunch. Everything, And I work with some absolutely wonderful PR people, and they're lovely, lovely people. But essentially, the job, once they've given them to the interviewer, really is over for them until the point where they need to terminate the interview, as in, come on, hurry up, next one. They keep the diary. So that's basically it's a difficult situation, and that's where mistakes can happen. So that's why I thought of doing what I do.
There we go. Who have you been working with?
lots of people. I'm not going to name names because clients, I've had probably since the start, 15, 16 different clients. And then I've got a few, I've did some work recently for Access Creative College in Birmingham, where I did a talk, with some students. I've got some work in the pipeline for the other couple of colleges I spoke. I also worked on a forum. They invited me to be a keynote speaker, and there was people. It's quite shocking, really. Turned up thinking it was going to be musicians, and it was like psychologists, doctors, all sorts of people, and it was like a really strange audience. But it transferred quite well. I've got some work with my college that I'm doing a video top tips thing with them in the next couple of weeks. And I've talked to a lot of people over the last few weeks, sat and did some sessions with some people as well. And it's been received really, really well. People can see the value in it. And especially when people are coming out of the other end of this dark period for music, hopefully the end is in sight. And they really need to put some things in place before they release their next album or their next single or their next video. It's really important now more than ever to get things right and to put your money in the smart place, and to invest correctly.
Yes.
And to a robust business plan is really, really important now.
Yeah,
more than
a good
ever.
Foundation.
Yeah.
All right. So, who's your top recommendations at the moment? Bands to listen to.
Bands to listen to at the minute. Wow, it's a tricky one really because I get so many. I get so many bands sent to me, but I quite like Dead Reynolds. They're ticking some boxes at the minute. I've played a few singles of theirs of late. Personally speaking, my interest in vinyl has increased somewhat of late, and I've always been a fan since I started out of Ghost.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of their stuff. Well, and you have as well.
Yeah.
Naturally, of course. So I've got a lot of their stuff that I've been collecting of late. And I like listening to all sorts of things. So it can be stuff that I can do for work, but it also stuff that I do. I've been listening for leisure quite a bit lately, and listening to a great album from the 70s, 1,000 Volts of Holt by John Holt. It was Trojan Records' most successful album,
really,
commercially, and it's been re-released on vinyl, and that's an absolute pleasure. And of course, I love early McCartney stuff, a lot of solo stuff, so a lot of stuff with Wings. Right. And I recently had Band on the Run on vinyl as well, and just revisiting old favourites. But in terms of emerging artists, there's a lot of exciting ones out there. Siamese from over, I think it's Denmark. They're Danish. Another exciting band. A lot of great music. Certainly an album that I'm really looking forward to is the new one by Architects, which comes out in I think it's the 22nd of Feb. Their new album, the single Animals, was the recent single. That was just blew me away completely. I was like, I've got to have that album when it comes out. So I pre-ordered it, and it's on its way. But there's a lot of emerging talent out there right now. Some really, really great people, and it's very exciting to see people still creating. At the beginning of the pandemic, everybody on social media was going, "What the hell are we going to do? We haven't got live performances, can't do anything." And we talked about streaming, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's not as good as a gig, though, is it?" But look at it now. Yeah. How sophisticated has it got in such a short period?
There's so many different platforms for it.
Oh, exactly. And now there's studios that are specifically for streaming. So artists will go to a COVID secure location, and all the mixing and the video mixing and everything will be done from there. And it's, these are innovations that have happened in the last few months, in less than a year. So it shows you the ability of people to adapt and survive. The music industry has always struggled on the whole because art is always considered secondary to a lot of different things. But for me, art is more important than anything. Because without art, we don't have soul. We don't have soul. We don't have life,
Yeah.
and we don't have that connection, that human emotional connection. Without art, it's not there. That's my bit of philosophy for the day.
Yeah, a lot of music is going to be written out of this as well. I think.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah,
there's going to
yeah.
be some new kind of takes on sounds coming out. Could be the thing music's needed to have a bit of something fresh coming in.
Absolutely. And I think, when you look at post-war Britain, for example, look what came out of that. You had rock and roll, you had, the resurgence of the British blues, the British blues explosion. We had the Beatles, we had all those sorts of things out of a horrific situation. World War II was just absolutely dreadful. But out of that came a whole bunch of creativity and a bunch of freedom. And I think if you remove people's freedom for a period of time, I know from my own personal point of view that once all this has been lifted, and I can go back out to festivals and gigs again and be amongst people, it's going to feel that so much better. And it's going to feel, you are going to naturally feel more creative and more enthusiastic. Because we take things for granted, having bands playing on your doorstep, being able to go and have a beer with someone, all those things are second nature. And when it's not second nature, when those things are removed from us, we learn to be a bit more philosophical about these things. And then hopefully, what I hope to see out at the other end of COVID is a whole rake of creativity and a bit of, a bit of being nice to each other again. And a bit of going, you know what, I'm so pleased to see you. Let's have that beer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to be nice.
It is.
It's a tip that's come up a lot, is to be nice to people.
It's really simple, isn't it? It's a simple notion. And in interviews, again, to take that back to interviews, that's another tip. Just be good. Just be nice. But, someone's taking the time to take interest in you. The least you can do is take a moment to be interested in them. And again, come back to the writing the name down, mentioning the name, just remembering the questions, acknowledging good questions. If something comes up and you go, that's a good question, tell them it's a good question. And again, little ego tickle.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a good, I've had it in the last couple of weeks. I've had a few interviews with some. That's a really good question. And that's made me immediately feel like what I've done has value. If they think it's good, it must be good.
Yeah.
Although, confidence should tell you that you've written something that's good, it's good. But, nice people don't think they're doing good.
Yeah, yes, there is that. Yeah, so it's good to be nice and to give a compliment as well.
Absolutely.
It's free.
I totally agree. It is. At least for now.
Yeah, don't give out too many.
See what happens. Yeah. Don't be too clever with them.
No. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for talking. It's good to see you.
Very well.
Good luck
And
with the
you,
rest
my
of the
friend.
business, and maybe
Thank you.
we'll catch up in the summer if there is festivals.
Let us do that, and let us drink mango cider till it comes out of our ears.
Oh, I haven't had that for a year.
Lily's mango cider. I want to give it a plug, as this is on video. Drink Lily responsibly, of course.
Oh yeah.
Lily's mango cider. Oh my goodness, it's a bloodstock phenomenon.
It is. I think it should just get rid of everything else. Just have that.
Yeah, what, sit in a field with a box of cider? You could do that on the park. It'll cost you less.
Yeah. You can order it as well from the brewery.
You can indeed, yes. And let's not put links and stuff. Let's not go that far. Other drinks are available.
Yeah.
Soft ones as well.
Yeah. Always hydrate. Plenty of water.
Keep hydrated.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Nick.
I'll see you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.